Wish I could do that.
There was a sign. Take the goat across first. Smelt burnt fur. His. If they didn't want their things broken, they really ought to make them stronger. That was always a rush. What's there?
smell charred flesh and hear screams. The ruins were on fire. But the Ravens had rigged up the core as some kind of burning ray. They wouldn't need to know the secret location. They were burning everything. It was killing them too. Their black feathers littered the path. He would have to take the core from them. It was the last thing he wanted to do.
Well, the eyes have had it.
Once again, Renato was dead right. Or actually just dead.
The goat. Take the goat across first, Renato thought. But it was too late. What was the point of this gate? Did they think no one would notice the lever? The rebel base seemed quiet. That was good. Also, it seemed to be burning. That wasn't so good. To everything, there is a season. He turned over and died. Personal space? that door been opened before? Is a very cool sword, thought Renato. No, seriously. He couldn't feel his paw anymore.
As the last raven fell, Renato felt worse than he ever had. The core was killing him, again. The council members cautiously came out into the smoke.
You saved us,
croaked the speaker. They would put the weaponized core deep in a cavern, she promised, where its poison could harm no one. They would heal him if they could, she said. No, it's a weapon now. We need one. I'll lead the charge.
It will kill you,
croaked the speaker. I guess it already has, Renato said. She bobbed her head gravely.
When all this is over,
she said,
we'll name our new capital city for you.
He flew towards the Imperial fleet, a myriad ships in disciplined formation, waiting for the signal to destroy the rebellion forever. Behind him, the rebels were charging. If he failed, they would die, and so the final battle began. Everything hurt. It was unpleasant to fight this way. With each blow he struck with his sword, he felt weaker. Yet each time the core fired, it got brighter. As if the heat from the burning ravens and buildings only fed its hunger. He wondered where Lupino was. Wasn't he supposed to be in the battle? No. He'd been captured, hadn't he? Oh, Renato's mind was smoky now, like the burning fleet. He hoped this wouldn't take long. Renato wondered idly if people who had built these poles had really, really long tentacles. This chest was filled with old concert t-shirts. And something useful. Renato had been the terror of the sandcastles when he was 2.
Oh, this really didn't have much in the way of safety features, did it?
Reynardo-Operus. Vulpus Major. Lando Nardo. If they were going to name a capital city after him, well, he just wished he had a better name. Where was Lupino? He missed Lupino's bitter outbursts. Or did he? Lupino had gotten him into this mess, hadn't he? The core was a wonderful weapon. It swept fire across the fleet. Ravens exploded in its gaze, and with every heartbeat, it grew brighter. He would die. But he would die every inch a hero. Spectacularly, changing history like the legendary heroes of lore. Or was it yore? He couldn't remember anymore.
This was not going spectacularly well, thought Reynardo.
Reynardo fell to his knees. The Emperor's bodyguards were lined up before his ship. Fierce ravens, all. And Zenobia. She was conjuring. He could not take another step. All he could do was fire the core. The ravens, Zenobia, the ship, all burst into flames, disintegrated, and blew away. So they had one, after all. The core grew brighter. He shielded his eyes, but he could still see it through his sleeves and through the flesh of his arm. And then he felt heat, as the fire grew to consume both fleets. And then he felt nothing.
Bernardo stared at the book. He was still alive. Again. And still only flying away from burning Ubar. Had he lived that adventure? Or only dreamt it? Had he really died? It felt so real, not like a dream at all. And he'd lost again. Oh, he hated that. But he had made different choices. And he'd lost in a different way. It was the book, wasn't it? Oracles showed you your destiny. But this was showing him different ways he could die miserably. Thanks a bunch, book, he thought. But these were destinies that he did not have to fulfill. And he hadn't learned anything new this time. He'd done the same thing twice, yet expected a different outcome. But that meant there must be a destiny where he survived and won, right? Otherwise, what was the point? And with that, the book's pages fluttered back once more to the beginning, and the clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer. Pieces of the Sky Ripper had surfaced. Bernardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Sky Ripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis Stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Bernardo. On the other hand, his old friend Lapino needed rescuing. Lapino was no game changer, but could Bernardo really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Lapino. Apparently, the Mad Rabbit had sold a Pegasus that he did not exactly own. Lapino always wiggled out of trouble, given time. But he was out of time. The Ravens had figured out that Lapino was a rebel spy. If the fleet reached him first, they'd string him up for that. Never mind the winged horse. Lapino had apparently managed to confuse the judge by arguing that he hadn't actually stolen a winged horse. He'd only sold it. But wait, where was the prison? The village was empty. Had everybody fled the Ravens? Crafting bench. Bernardo wondered what he could make with it. When Renato went to the china shop, for some reason the owner was always nervous.
That was odd. Renato had been here, at this exact place, at this exact time. But this time, there were so many more ravens. Renato looked around the empty village and reflected. The Sky Ripper had turned out to be far too dangerous to be used. Time to turn to what he knew best.
This is why heroes are called dashing, Renato thought. See? Dashing? Get it?
So that's what they meant by a firewall. What unlocks a firewall?
As for the gate, well, he could take her or leave her. Sorry, it's best I could do.
Fresh meat! Ravens were landing everywhere. The advance guard. He'd better get moving. If they got to Lupino first, they'd eat him for breakfast. Or a snack. Ravens weren't picky. If they got hungry, they sometimes forgot to interrogate their prisoners. Even top spies like Lupino. Where had the mad rabbit got to?
Well, no sense collecting more materials. It was time to make something pointy. Practically sure he'd find something useful in one of these things.
Dirty and bloody, Bernardo finally reached Lupino. The rabbit was practicing his shuffle. Bernardo recognized the cards. It was Lupino's favorite deck. Oh, I thought you were in danger. I am. The Ravens are coming. Oh, the prison thing. Right, yeah, see, this guard owed me 53 ducats, so we made a deal. They're very reasonable people, actually, for weasels. Now, I got a brilliant plan to kidnap Zenobia. We capture Zenobia, we find out what she knows, and that's the whole war right there. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Capture the Emperor's greatest general, who also happened to be a deadly sorcerer and, oh, his only daughter? That would be worth it. On the other hand, he could still get to the core of the Sky Ripper, even if he couldn't get the whole thing. It must have great power. To make the Sky Ripper, the Transcendent Emperor had wrapped an armature around the eye of a god. Bernardo had already let that armature slip away to save Lupino's life. But even its core, the eye torn from a god, surely they could fashion a great weapon from that.
The core of the Sky Ripper? Peppino's excited. That's an actual thing that we can just go and get. You've been busy.
He sure had. Renato told him all the things he'd been up to. Soon they got to talking about old times, about wages they'd won and lost, and scrapes they'd barely got out of. It was good to be back with his friend. True, the core was capable of terrible, uncontrollable destruction. But this time, he was sure it would work great. It's beautiful here, thought Renato. He was thrilled to be back with his old war buddy. He'd missed the Mad Rabbit, but something was not quite right. What were these poles exactly? Parking meters from the time of the lost gods? If he ever had a castle, he was going to hide his stuff better. Crafting bench. What kind of sword could he make now?
Boy, someone has spent a lot of money for a graduation present. Reynardo was remembering all his old tricks, and some new ones. Now, he really ought to ask for a raise. The new pathway made Reynardo curious. You almost never saw wild gogglers together like this. The toads had to train them not to peck each other to death. So these had to be Imperial gogglers. That meant ravens were up ahead.
Didn't your mother tell you it's rude to stare? Snapped Reynardo, a little smug.
What's for dinner, you thought? I hope it's not broccoli. The platform used a hybrid propulsion system fueled by anti-gravity and wishful thinking. This chest smelled kind of funky. He hoped he didn't get it in his clothes. Renato felt wrong all over. He could feel an almost palpable sickness in the air. And if the land could have tumors, they would look like these monstrous crystals. The forest was quieter than it had been. There were insects, but few birds, if you didn't count the ravens. Renato smelled sick animals and dying ones, but no healthy ones. And getting a bad feeling about this, Renato thought. Maybe Lapina was right. Maybe they should have kidnapped Zenobia instead of coming here. Gem of power. Ooh, you didn't find those every day. The thing about puzzles was, once you solved one, you knew how to solve it again. Puzzles had no, what was the word? Replayability? Renato wondered if you could design a puzzle that would be different every time you played with it. Wouldn't that be fun? Well, he'd always wanted to do that.
To gravity for me.
As he held the radiant icosahedron, Renato felt queasy, like dozens of tiny worms were nibbling his insides. It wasn't healthy to be so close to the eye of a god. How could he use it? He could take it to the observatory. The scientists there could tell him how to harness its ancient power. But honestly, Renato ached to get away from it. He brought the core back with him to the Farfarer. But honestly, Renato ached to be rid of it.
Tell you what, said Lupino. I'll take it to the observatory. You attack the Imperial outpost.
The Imperial outpost was a vital communications node. Taking it could shatter the Empire's ability to coordinate. And it would be full of secret plans and maps and maybe even rebel prisoners. It was a good target for a hero like Renato. But what if Lupino lost the core to the Empire? That could be a good thing, couldn't it? Was Renato ready to take that risk? Maybe it was better if he brought the core to the scientists himself. Lupino was a touchy rabbit. Renato knew that. You're brave, I know, Renato said. But this is what I was hired to do.
At least let me run ahead and warn the scientists you're coming.
So, Lupino was intent on being a hero, just like him. War made sensible men crazy for glory, and Lupino had never been sensible. But what was the harm? Lupino might well trip over a hornet's nest of ravens. But that was better than ravens lying in ambush, wasn't it? They finished the trip to the Nexus in silence. Renato had no sooner rescued his friend than he was putting him back in danger. All right, he finally said as they landed. Go. As Renato watched Lupino vanish on the horizon, he could feel nausea building in him. He felt ill. Could his knees really be aching this much? But how could he have handed the core off to Lupino? That was a recipe for disaster.
Good. Was it good for you?
The mysterious sword from the east made you so fast you could catch a fly with your chopsticks. If that's what you really wanted.
Good! I need a new rug for me nest, said the lead raven.
mythical jewel. Bernardo couldn't wait to find a workbench. Bernardo felt worse. All his joints were aching now. He'd been through beatings that felt better than this. So the core had a kind of poison that could harm you without even touching you. That's new. Well, it had power. The rebellion needed something with power. And how was this any worse than a sword wound? Well, a death by sword was sudden and fair. This was just squalid. A piecemeal death, like old age.
Bernardo, smash!
The Nexus Observatory had some of the Empire's greatest scientists. If anyone could rig the core into a useful weapon, and even better, make it stop leaking poison, it would be them. This would be the perfect place for a tic-tac-toe board. Energy spheres. Easy to dodge, but boy do they sting if you didn't pay attention. his hook didn't break.
The observatory was a burning hulk. Dead scientists everywhere. Bernardo found the mad rabbit cowering under a desk.
The Ravens. They must have known we were coming,
said Lupino.
How did you... Well, see, I was doing a card trick with my lucky deck, and I kind of bobbled the cards, so I went under the desk to gather them up, and boom! I guess we'll have to take the car straight to the secret base.
The secret rebel base. Yes. They had engineers there.
But wait.
Calaveras, the sage in the mountains. Maybe he would know what to do with the naked core. Yes, the secret base. Not even Lupino knew where it was. They had engineers there. Those toads would surely know what to do with the core's power. And then he'd be free of it. But he couldn't take Lupino. The core would work its evil on him too. You stay here.
Give me the coordinates. I'll meet you there.
Someone needs to bury these scientists.
Why do I get all the fun jobs?
And with that, Bernardo returned to the Farfarer and took off. The ruins were quiet, but Bernardo could hear a buzzing in his ears. Was it bugs? Or was it the core slowly feeding him poison? The council would know what to do. If the core had this much power, it could surely change the terms of the great battle that was coming. And maybe they would take this burden from him. Maybe.
Think of all the artisans he was creating employment for. Truly, he was a job creator.
He missed her. And Zenobia. Hypatia, the kid's mother. Bernardo had never thought he'd date a librarian. He'd always figured himself for the barmaid type. But then, he'd never figured the library of Ubar would have comic books, or that Hypatia would know anything about them. He missed her.
Renato had left Lupino behind because the core was poison. The core was poisoned because he didn't have the armature. He didn't have the armature because he'd rescued Lupino. Oh, Renato's head hurt.
He was more and more extraordinary. How had it come to this? Renato had signed on as an adventurer. Sure, the Emperor had gone mad. Sure, Renato had heard horrors from the ghosts of dead kittens and puppies sacrificed in his blasphemous rituals. But when he jumped in, he'd only been a little bored and slightly broke. And here he was, carrying a bucket of death across a broken landscape. Why not drop it and run? Because he hated to quit in the middle. That was his fatal flaw. He had to know how it all turned out. Renato was surprised that he didn't feel more pain. Just a bit dizzy. Whew. With materials like this, he could probably make a really nice pair of barbecue tongs. Or even a sword. Alas, they had to bury him in a bucket. Actually, several buckets. Oh, what does the box say? Asked one raven. Another one called back, "Oh, I'm dying!" And they both laughed hysterically. Ha! Bet you never saw that coming.
long stairs. So he was close to the rebel base. Nothing was on fire. So far, so good. If only he had some way to break the ice. Or convince it he was a friend. Maybe I should follow my nose, thought Renato. Renato remembered when he'd first stolen one of these. Good times. He dropped the core at the entrance to the council chambers.
Get that thing out of here!
Croaked the speaker.
It's making us sick!
That's the core of the Sky Ripper, said Renato.
That's not useless at all,
said an engineer toad.
It's poisonous. Look at the fox. He's ill. Probably dying.
Yeah, not useless at all, said Renato. So what do? Rub it on His Majesty? The engineer chuckled. Renato didn't like it when engineers chuckled.
Oh, I got it. Listen, I can make a bomb and spread bits of the core all over a circle about 100 paces wide. Little chunks of poison and death. All you have to do is just get it near the Emperor. He'll kill him and his bodyguard and chop off the head of the fleet. Yeah, and if we're lucky, might poison some of the ravens around there as well.
What about me?
Right, what about you? Well, I'll build in a timer. You can set it and run.
No, that's a horrible idea, said Renato.
Oh, we have to do something, yes?
Said the speaker.
This is something.
Renato couldn't argue with that.
And so, reluctantly, Renato loaded the rigged core onto the Farfarer and set sail towards the Emperor's ship. The rebels took the fight to the Imperial fleet, but Renato was too sick to enjoy the view.
He must have passed out as a firm hand grabbed him and shoved him forward. This was it.
The fleet seemed very big, and its ravens very tough. Or maybe he was just slower and weaker than before. He hated the idea of poisoning the enemy. It wasn't fair. Face to face with a raven, let the best swordsman survive. But they wouldn't even know what was killing them. Feather by feather, scale by scale. He didn't mind dying a hero. That sometimes went with being a hero. But he didn't feel at all like a hero. Not today. The road less traveled, thought Reynardo. How intriguing.
The rock felt hot in his hand. He could feel its secret power. He wished there were more pylons he could use the hook on. They really needed to construct additional pylons.
He was exhausted. He was making stupid mistakes. His fur was coming off in bunches. Up ahead, he could see the Emperor's ship, long and sleek, a floating palace. The bomb would only poison a circle 100 paces wide. He would get as close as he could, set it, and run. Oh, this was a lousy way to win a rebellion, he thought. He didn't want a medal for this. He just wanted to be forgotten. Sometimes, Reynardo really hated inanimate objects. Good thing Reynardo didn't have vertigo. Renato twisted the timer on the bomb as far as it would go and staggered off. His knees hurt. Oh, everything hurt. He staggered away as far as he could until he had to lie down. He could see the entire Imperial fleet from here, and the rebel ships engaged with it. There was a blinding flash. And a second later, a monstrous thump. Burning rocks arced across the sky over both fleets. A wreath of fire shot outwards, rolling across the fleets. A pillar of smoke boiled up from where the Emperor's ship had been. It reached into the clouds. That's a wee bit more than 100 paces, thought Renato. It took Renato most of that evening to die. Some of the toughest ravens lasted all week. Some of the rebels in the furthest ships survived as much as a month. That winter, with neither Empire nor rebels to rule them, the islands slid into banditry. And so began the Second Age of Darkness. And just like that, he was alive again, and back on the Farfarer, still fleeing burning Ubar. The book was still open before him. So, the book was a portal. It took you to the future, when your destinies would branch. He had failed and died 3 times, and he hadn't learned anything new this time. He'd done the same thing twice, yet expected a different outcome. But he was starting to feel like he was getting the hang of this. There was a way through to victory. He could feel it. He just had to keep running the path of destinies. With that, the book fluttered back to the beginning, and he fell into it. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game-changer. Pieces of the Skyripper had surfaced. Renato knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong, but he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Skyripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Renato. On the other hand, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Lupino was no game-changer, but could Renato really leave an old friend to the Ravens? Every child knew about the Skyripper. The Transcendent Emperor had buried its pieces deep. And then, this Emperor's horrific sacrifices had brought it back to the surface. Renato wasn't exactly sure how to use the legendary weapon. But surely, there must be some way to do it without provoking another catastrophe. Had he, somehow, summoned the long-lost components of the legendary weapon out of the deep places of the Earth? It was more than Renato could fathom. But if he could find a legendary weapon, he would use it. As he set foot on the island, Renato could not help but feel a tinge of guilt. He'd left Lupino behind. He hoped the Mad Rabbit had somehow escaped the Ravens. He hoped they hadn't eaten him. If they had, he hoped they hadn't eaten him alive. Why had he chosen the Skyripper? Renato never made plans that required constant vigilance. He was a hero. He didn't think too much. He just went with his gut and hoped it all worked out. The Skyripper was a long shot. He'd have to devote himself to it. No side journeys, no rescuing old friends. That was against his nature. Could he stick with it? Poor Renato loved to improve his gear. Hey, a workbench! He could try out his new bling. Two eyes good. One eye dead. There was a pleasant breeze coming through that door. Had it been closed before? Really bring out your eyes. There had to be a way to use the Sky Ripper without causing a catastrophe. Why? Maybe it's always dangerous, he imagined Zenobia saying. Always the voice of reason, that one. Well, there had to be a way to use the Sky Ripper, because not being able to use it was boring. So there. To hurt. Actually, it already did.
Renato wondered if it wasn't cheaper to build bridges and stairs.
Where did that go to?
Don't look down, he thought.
Sleep tight, thought Renato.
Felt bad for littering. These islands were short on trash cans. See? With enough leverage, you could go anywhere.
I think this is yours, said Renato, but he couldn't hear his enemy's answer. There was a cat in this one, and something useful.
Sky Ripper's armature. The stuff that dreams are made of. Engineers' dreams, anyway.
The device was intricate. No one alive had the skill to make a thing like it. How was it part of a weapon at all? He'd have to ask a scientist. But first, he'd get the second piece. Sky Ripper had a heart. A core that had come to rest on the next island. Well, there was another island he could reach. Zenobia had just invaded it with her father's Raven battalions. She must be encamped there still. But fighting Zenobia now, that made no sense at all. He'd already sacrificed one friend to get this armature, was it? He didn't need to hurry to face her. She would find him. It was a no-brainer. He'd sacrificed his old friend Lapino to get the armature. And the armature was useless by itself, only a series of coils and wheels. War demanded sacrifices, and he would make more before the end. He would have to choose the greatest good no matter how much it cost him. Zenobia. Well, he would see her sooner or later, across a battlefield or a sword's point before all this was over. He was sure of that. The power was in the core. Obviously, he had to get the core.
He looked up at the old trees around him. They were so big and so old. They'd been there before he was born, and they'd be there after he'd passed into legend. Was he confronting his own unimportance? What had got into him? He was no philosopher. Anyway, who cares? He was plenty important. He was a hero, and soon he'd prove it. There were rumors of talking apes deep in the forest, but everyone knew apes couldn't talk. Or I could go that way, he thought. His sword food teacher used to say power gems were cheating. Stupid old fart.
We'll always have Paris, he thought. And then he died. Renato was dead tired. Then he was just dead. Smashing things was fun. There was something sour in the air. Like the earth had ruptured over something that had been fermenting for a very long time. You almost never saw wild gogglers together like this. The toads had to train them not to peck each other to death. So these had to be imperial gogglers. That meant ravens were up ahead. What else could you hook? There were fewer and fewer trees. There were only these huge crystalline growths. Had those been here before? He no longer heard birds except for the feverish cawing of the ravens when they attacked. He couldn't smell the small animals of the forest, the mice and rabbits. Where had they gone? And he was getting hungry too. This was an unhealthy place to be. wasn't making a dent in those shields. This jewel was more than sparkly. It had arcane power and an engraving. To Cindy. It looked like they'd forgotten to turn off their flamethrower. For some reason, Renato remembered a fairy tale his mother had told him about a land where only the apes talked and animals went around without clothes. The 20-sided core made him feel physically sick. Once he had sneaked into a temple of the dark art, and he hadn't liked what he smelt and saw there. This felt like that. As quick as he could, he wrangled the icosahedron into the armature. The wheels began to spin, then glow. The sick feeling quickly spun away. Now he only felt sad. He had lost good friends for this war apparatus. He carried his prize back to the Farfarer. Now, he had to make his next move. There was a key Imperial outpost on the Nexus. If this really was some sort of super weapon, he could use it to wreak havoc on the enemy. And if it wasn't, well, better to know that before the final battle. But maybe he should show it to some scientists first. There was an observatory on the Nexus. Maybe he should go there before he fired it.
course, if you've just assembled a weapon out of legend that can exile gods from the world, you'd want to have a scientist or two look at it. And even if they disagreed and you had time, you could ask Calaveras himself. Yes, the observatory would be his objective. Why had the parts of the Sky Ripper only surfaced now, thousands of years after the Transcendent Emperor had dismantled it? The mad Emperor Isengrim had performed terrible, bloodthirsty rituals to invoke the lost gods. Was that why these ancient artifacts were rising out of the ground? How perfect, then, that the Sky Ripper would reappear to be his destruction.
And hopefully this time, just his destruction.
Well, they really needed to redecorate anyway.
I wonder what happens if I go that way. lot like Tarzan.
A legendary weapon was exactly what the rebellion needed. They were outnumbered. The once kind emperor had become a tyrant. But his ravens stayed loyal, for he fed them his victims, and the other animals were too frightened to rebel. Renato shuddered at what the emperor was trying to do. To bring back the lost gods, the Black Harvest, the Black Sun? No. He would stop that toad, no matter what the risk.
Renato had found his game changer. He would ignore all distractions and focus on the Sky River. There was an engraving. Maximum capacity, 130 people. was definitely easier to fight inanimate objects. Renato was thrilled. The scientists seemed to think he'd put the Sky Ripper together right. But one toad was worried.
Yeah, the Sky Ripper could tear a hole in existence itself. There are invisible strings that tie the universe together. If the Sky Ripper cut one, the hole would widen and widen until our whole existence fell into it.
Another toad sighed. Irving still believes in string theory.
At least go see Calaveras.
Yeah, said the worried toad.
He knows more than anyone else has forgotten about the Transcendent Emperor.
If anyone could tell him how to use this weapon safely, it would be Calaveras. It was he who had told Renato how to find it in the first place. But maybe he had to give up on using it as a weapon. Maybe he had to go to the secret rebel base and ask the generals there what he could do with a weapon that he dared not use. One way or another, there had to be a safe way to use it. Well, he should have known he'd have to consult Calaveras again. The scientists at the observatory were smart enough. But what did they know of the Transcendent Emperor? He hoped it wouldn't delay him too long. The rebels had scheduled the final battle soon. Every day they delayed risked the exposure of the secret base. And some soldiers were already drifting back to their homes and families. Calaveras would fix the Sky Ripper for him. And then he would win the final battle. Maybe it was the cold. But after a few steps, Renato's optimism started to slump. What if Calaveras couldn't help? Did Renato dare use the Sky Ripper? Oh, he hated that he had chosen this path. It was so much simpler to rescue friends and attack enemies. Even if some of those friends were more trouble than his enemies, some of those enemies had been friends before and might be lovers after. No, okay, it wasn't all that much simpler, no. Physics made his brain hurt. That, at least, he was sure of. Renato wondered if his future self had commissioned these poles. Renato had always wanted a flying carpet. This was more like a flying tabletop, but it would do. Tried to focus on the now. The ravens who seemed everywhere all the time. Where did they hatch from? Were there giant raven hatcheries somewhere, or did they have families? Ooh, he didn't want to think about raven mummies raising their darling raven chicks. Yeah, Calaveras would help. He would make Renato feel better about using the Sky Ripper. And then Renato wouldn't have to worry about ravens ever again. thought Reynardo.
Find a snack. He was feeling a bit peckish. Once, he found a Superman issue #1 in mint condition in a jar he'd broken. He planned to keep breaking things until he had the whole series. The rebels were counting on Reynardo. He hoped Calaveras knew what he was doing. Calaveras had never let him down.
Yeah, of course I can make it work better.
But when Reynardo explained about the strings, Calaveras grew thoughtful.
Oh, strings, you say? Well, the Arcana do speak of the ties that bind the world.
He drew many intricate symbols in the dirt.
Yeah, so, according to my calculations, each time you fire, I'm afraid there's a 1 in 120 chance you'll destroy the universe.
That's pretty good odds. That's like rolling, 21 dice and they all come up 6. What are the odds of that?
What? No! It's more like 2.716s in a row.
Anyway, with those odds, it won't happen if I use it just once,
Reynardo said, although he wasn't sure that was entirely right.
Yeah, no, that's not right. Each time you use it... Okay, look, just don't use it ever.
All right, I guess. As he sailed towards the fleet, Reynardo could see the dropships of the rebels coming out of the clouds. This was it. The big battle. They could not afford to lose this one.
What if it didn't go well? What if he had to use the Sky Ripper? Could he risk the entire universe in the throw of a dice? On the other hand, what were the odds of rolling 21? Or was it 2.71? Sixes in a row. He had a feeling they were surprisingly good. That is, bad. Anyway, the odds were big. His brain was hurting again.
The battle was not going spectacularly well. What had the rebels been thinking? They'd been thinking he would bring the Sky Ripper, or the Iblis Stone, or that he'd sideline Zenobia somehow, or turn her. Couldn't he use the Sky Ripper just once? After all, if chances were 1 in 128, that meant he'd for sure be okay the first time. They'd get worse each time he used it, but the first time would be okay, right? He wasn't sure that it was right. So he didn't fire the Sky Ripper. He just brought it along, in case.
It was time for a little exploration. Not everyone knew how to use magical gems. Of course, not everyone had magical gem gauntlets like he did.
Someone had told him the odds didn't change just because you'd had a streak of good luck. His gut told him that was wrong, though. And he always listened to his gut. On the other hand, 128 chances to win, but one of them would destroy the universe. Ooh, that seemed a bit serious. Maybe he could defeat the Emperor without firing the Sky Ripper. Maybe he could bluff, but with a real weapon. Like in cards, when you had 3 names, but you pretended you had a fizbin. That could work.
Where Reynardo went next, we cannot follow. Yet. his fault. They looked so breakable.
Interrupted story time!
Caught the lead raven.
Now we'll never find out how it ended!
Don't look down, he told himself. Don't look down.
He set up the Sky Ripper and let it warm up. He would bluff if he had to. Zenobia came out, flanked by a very daunting platoon of ravens. You won't actually use that, she said in that annoying, I know everything because I'm a cat and you know nothing because you're just a fox voice she had. Or I know the odds. Good, because there's a real chance you could destroy the universe. No, not the first time I use it. The odds are too low. What? No? Yeah, sure. The first time, the odds are practically nothing. They only go up if I use it a bunch more times. No, but that's not how odds work. Didn't you pay attention in class? Now surrender, or I'll use it. Just once, he said. Don't.
He felt sure the odds were with him. He had to go with his gut. That's what heroes do. Fire, he said. Please? The Sky Ripper fired. With a tremendous whoosh, the Emperor's flagship went up in flames. It was awesome. Then he noticed
there was a hole in the air. A blackness, like a tear in a parchment. Wind was blowing into it, widening it. It grew larger, and even larger. Crates fell upwards into it, and the world itself seemed bent, like the reflection on a curved mirror, as it poured into the ravenous hole. Ah, 1 in 128. What are the odds? Thought Reynardo, and then everything fell into the hole and was gone. And he hadn't learned anything new this time. He'd done the same thing twice, yet expected a different outcome.
There would be a way to win. Reynardo could feel it. He'd have to explore choices he'd never made before he could figure it all out, though. And with that, the book's pages fluttered to the beginning once again. And he fell. The clouds parted over the Isles of Boreas. It was time to choose. The rebellion was in trouble. Ravens were scouting for the secret rebel base. They needed a game changer. Pieces of the Skyripper had surfaced. Reynardo knew that using it could go catastrophically wrong. But he was sure he could figure out how to use it safely. Also, a temple had risen out of empty desert. The Emperor had brought the Skyripper pieces up out of ancient burial by his obscene rituals. Could this be where the Iblis Stone was hidden? Someone better get it before he does, thought Reynardo. On the other hand, his old friend Lupino needed rescuing. Lupino was no game changer, but could Reynardo really leave an old friend to the Ravens? The island was windswept desert. No one went there except ostriches and ostrich hunters. The Iblis Stone. It sounded ominous. It sounded powerful. If the Emperor was searching for it, it must be dangerous. And so, Reynardo went ostrich hunting. Every child could sing verses about the Skyripper, but ancient codices held hints of other things. A stone that ate souls, a ruby that drank blood, a jewel only a righteous man could give away. Were all these things the Iblis Stone? Long hidden in a buried temple, another ancient item that was only resurfacing now, drawn up from the deeps by the Emperor's horrific rituals?